Hey there, and welcome to Haunting Lullabies. I'm here to help you unwind and drift into the night with some spine-tingling stories. But before you settle in too comfortably, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe only if you truly enjoy what we do here. Don't forget to drop a comment below telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is over there. It's amazing to feel like we're all part of a global community. A quick heads up. There will be a few ads in the first 15 minutes, but don't worry after that. It's all completely ad-free. I promise you won't want to miss what's coming next because these stories are like no others. So, dim the lights, maybe light a candle for that cozy touch, and let's dive into tonight's haunting tale. The vale beneath Black Hollow, I first saw the cottage on a fog-drenched Tuesday morning, hidden behind a wall of rain and oak trees that looked older than time. My grandmother, Edith Vale, had died 6 months, that's earlier, leaving behind a property I didn't even know existed, a small estate in a rural corner of northern England called Black Hollow. The solicitor's letter described it in cold legal terms. A 2-story stone dwelling with adjoining acreage and woodland, to be transferred in full to Miss Eleanor Vale. But when I first set foot there, the air itself felt alive, damp, heavy, charged with a silence that didn't feel natural. They say the countryside is peaceful. Black Hollow wasn't. It was watching. The front gate creaked open by itself when I arrived. And though I told myself it was just the wind, the noise had a strange rhythm like someone breathing through the metal hinges. I parked the car and stared at the house. Its windows were black, reflective, almost like eyes, and I swear I saw movement behind one of them. But when I blinked, there was nothing. The key didn't fit at first. It scraped the lock like it hadn't been turned in years, which was strange. Because according to the solicitor, my grandmother had lived here until just before her death. Inside, the air smelled of burnt dust and lavender, her favorite perfume mixed with something else, damp earth, like the kind you dig up from under a grave. I walked through the rooms one by one. Everything was old but neat, preserved, almost staged. There were no personal photos, no clothes in the wardrobes, nothing that told me who she really was. Only one room looked recently used, the study. On the desk sat a large black-bound book with no title. The cover was carved with a symbol that made my stomach twist, 2 intersecting lines forming a crooked V beneath a circle. Something about it looked wrong, too deliberate, as if it wasn't decoration but containment. I opened it. The first page contained a single sentence written in careful looping cursive. Beneath the hollow lies the debt of our blood. I didn't understand it then, but I would soon. That night, the rain returned. The sound of it was hypnotic, like static pressing against the windows. I fell asleep on the couch downstairs because the upstairs rooms felt off. The air there had a weight to it, thick and cold, like someone had been crying in those walls for years. Around midnight, I woke up to a soft sound tapping. 3 knocks, pause. 3 knocks, pause. Coming from beneath the floorboards. I thought it was the pipes, maybe old wood shifting. But then the knocks came again louder, deliberate, answering my movement when I stood up. When I walked toward the kitchen, the tapping stopped. Silence swallowed the room. Then a whisper. Ellie. It wasn't the house creaking. It wasn't wind. It was a voice female. Quiet, trembling, as if coming through soil. I froze. My grandmother's name for me, Ellie. No one else used that. I grabbed my phone. No signal. The landline in the hall clicked when I lifted it dead. The whisper came again, closer this time. Ellie, under the floor. The floorboards near the hearth shifted slightly, like something beneath them was breathing. I backed away slowly, eyes locked on the movement. And then a smell hit me. earth, rot, and lavender. The same scent I'd noticed when I arrived, now stronger, chokingly sweet. I fled the room and locked myself upstairs. Sleep didn't come. When dawn finally broke, I went back downstairs. Everything was still. The floor looked undisturbed, but near the fireplace, the rug had been moved a few inches aside. Beneath it, a small trapdoor, its edges lined with that same crooked V symbol burned into the wood. I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I called the solicitor again. He seemed surprised. "I'm sorry, Miss Vale," he said, "but there's been a mistake. The property records show 2 structures on the estate, not one. A cottage and an underground chamber." I felt my stomach twist. An underground chamber? For what? "That's unclear," he said after a pause. "It's sealed. No access point on record. Built during the 1800s, according to the deed. Locals refer to it as the Veil Room." The Veil Room. That night, I found my grandmother's handwriting again, a note tucked inside the black book. It read, "If you hear her voice, don't answer. If you find the door, don't open it. And if she says your name wrong." But curiosity is its own kind of curse. By the 3rd night, I was hearing the whisper constantly. Sometimes it sounded like pleading, sometimes like singing. It always came from below. I told myself I wouldn't touch the trap door. I told myself I'd sell the place and leave. But on the 4th night, I found muddy footprints in the kitchen, bare, human, leading from the trap door. And that's when I realized something terrifying. They weren't mine. The footprints were small, delicate and perfectly formed, each toe, the arch, even the faint whorl of skin where a heel lifts from wet soil. They glistened faintly in the dim kitchen light, damp as if they'd been pressed moments ago. They led from the trapdoor to the entryway and vanished at the threshold as though absorbed by the wood or swallowed by the space between frames. The door was still locked, the windows latched. The silence that followed felt heavy and intimate, like I wasn't alone and hadn't been since I'd arrived. I stood in the center of the kitchen and tried to breathe like a normal, rational person. I told myself it was condensation, leaky pipes, my own imagination printing shapes onto damp floors. I told myself a lot of things. None of them felt true. By late morning, I'd convinced myself to take a walk, fresh air, village gossip, anything to tether me to something ordinary. The lane from the cottage wound between hedgerows that dragged their fingers across my coat as I passed. Rain had softened everything to gray blur. The road, the fields, the sky. About half a mile down, I came upon a sign hand-painted on wood. Black, hollow, "Please drive slowly." Below it, someone had scratched a stick figure star and crossed it out with 2 lines like the crooked V I'd seen in the book. The village was a huddle of slate roofs and stone chimneys gathered around a square where a single shop sold bread, batteries, and balsam cough syrup. The bell over the door rang when I stepped inside, announcing me to shelves and quiet eyes. The woman behind the counter had hair like sheep's wool and a mouth that could cut stone. "You're Edith's," she said. Not a question. Thought I recognized the jawline. "You have her eyes, too." I didn't know what to do with that. "I'm Eleanor, Mrs. Rome," she said. "Everyone calls me Win. You'll need paraffin if you're staying through the storm. The lines go out half our winters." "I found something in the cottage," I said, testing the weight of my voice. "A trapdoor, I think there's an old cellar. Do you know anything about an underground chamber? The Veil Room?" The bell rang behind me. An elderly man stepped in, took one look at me, and turned right around and left. Win's knuckles whitened around the counter. You leave that door shut. So it's real. There's a lot that's real, she said. Not all of it belongs to us. I told her about the footprints before I could stop myself. Wynne listened without interruption, her eyes lowering to the counter, as though she was memorizing the grain of the wood. When I finished, she pushed a tin of matches toward me, like a benediction. "The veil's thin here," she said at last. "Always has been. Some families keep watch. Yours kept more than most." "What does that mean?" "Edith was the last warden. When she got sick, things loosened. You feel it already, don't pretend you don't." She stepped closer, her eyes suddenly tender. "Grief makes us porous. It lets things through." "What things?" Wynne looked over my shoulder, into a corner of the shop I didn't want to turn toward. The unasked, the undone, the unburied. I paid for paraffin, candles, matches, and a package of oat biscuits I didn't remember reaching for. Wynne folded the paper bag twice and set it gently between us. "If you hear your name," she said softly, "walk away. If the voice is kind, walk faster." "I think the voice knows me," I said, almost inaudible. "It knows your blood," she corrected. "Blood is a door." On the way back, the rain paused, as if the sky had inhaled and forgotten to release it. The air smelled like iron. I reached the cottage with a feeling like stepping into a fever you've learned to navigate everything both too bright and too far. When I tried the kitchen light, it flickered once and died. The paraffin lamp caught on the second match, throwing an orange pond of light that made every shadow look like it had its own breath. The rug lay folded back as if someone had revealed the trapdoor with deliberate care and then stepped aside to let me decide. "I won't open you," I said to the door, because it felt like a thing one could speak to. "I'm not ready." Something tapped from below. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Pause. It was patient, as if it had time and I did not. I dragged the desk chair over and sat, watching the wood, my breath ghosting the lamplight. After an hour, the fatigue became a tide. My eyes slipped closed just for a moment, just to rest, and when I opened them, the room was different. The light had shifted. The air smelled like lavender and damp wool again, and the trapdoor was open. There was no sound of hinges, no impression of force. It was just open, as if it had been born that way, and only pretended otherwise when I looked straight at it. Cold, lifted from the mouth of the door, so pure and mineral it tasted like old coins. A ladder descended into the dark. It was newer than the door untarnished rungs. No splinters where hands had grasped. Someone had used it recently. I leaned over the square and held the lamp into the throat of the house. The flame collapsed and guttered, as if the space below were a lung breathing in. I lit it again and tied it to the ladder with a length of string from the junk drawer, lowering it slowly. At 4 feet, it illuminated rough stone walls. At 6, the suggestion of a floor. When the lamp reached bottom, the flame steadied and held, a trembling planet in a private sky. "Ellie," said the voice from below. "Please." It wasn't a threat. It was exhausted, ancient. Something in me cracked. "Who are you?" I whispered, entirely aware that asking is the same as answering. The reply came, not from a direction, but from the air. "I was yours. I am yours. I'm what we were. Come see." I clenched my jaw, closed my eyes. I could leave. I could nail the door shut and drive to a motel and burn this place in, my memory, and never come back. But the idea felt absurd, like refusing to look at your own reflection. The truth had a gravity I couldn't outrun. I climbed down, The air thickened as I descended, hum against ear bones, a pressure that found old aches I didn't know I carried. The rungs were spaced for someone shorter than me. I had to curl myself to match their rhythm. At the bottom, the lamp threw light across a circular room cut from slate. The stones were fitted without mortar, joints so clean they could have been drawn. In the center, a ring of ash surrounded a shallow depression filled with fine, pale dust. Sigils familiar in their wrongness were carved into the rock at even intervals. Between them, small bundles hung from threads, hair tied with twine, cracked beads, a child's silver rattle dark with tarnish, and bones, so many bones, not human, lamb, bird, fox, arranged carefully in spiral patterns that made my head throb to look at. A dress the skin of a dress hung from a hook. Stitched strips of linen been mended so many times it was more seam than cloth. The far wall wasn't a wall at all. It was a veil of black stone polished to an impossible sheen, a mirror that reflected the room without reflecting me. My lamp was there, the ash ring was there, but the empty space where I stood showed only darkness, a human-shaped absence that wasn't filled by any shape of me. I knew, completely and in 1 second, why they called this the Veil Room. "Grandmother?" I asked, ashamed of the hope in my voice. The darkness moved. Not forward, not out, but through my chest, like standing at the edge of the sea and letting a wave pass inside you without touching your skin. It crowded my lungs and settled behind my eyes with the certainty of a hand on the shoulder. When the voice came, it wasn't from the room. It was from the memory in my bones. "Not Edith," it said. "Older. What are you?" My lips barely parted, but the sound slid along my teeth like a thread being drawn through cloth. "A debt," the voice said patiently. "A promise. A door left ajar so the right souls can go home and the wrong ones can't get through." "I don't understand." "You do," it said, and it was true enough to hurt. "Your mother tried to forget. Your grandmother tried to carry it alone. And your blood pretends to be city and noise and glass. But it remembers the hills. It remembers the work. Come closer." The black stone shimmered, not changing and yet changed. Not a mirror now, but a surface that admitted its depth, the way the sky at night admits itself for what it is. I stepped near enough that I could see the fine lines of carvings along the edges, fine as hair, patterns that echoed the crooked V, the circle, the thing I shouldn't name that leaned against every angle like a closed mouth wanting to open. Forms moved behind the veil, shapes like people, except by people I mean the idea of faces, and by moved I mean folded toward and away from being seen. One shape noticed me. The room contracted, as if the cell of air around me had been pierced. "Wardens," the voice said, not as a name but as a category. "We keep, we weigh, we refuse passage when refusing is all that keeps the living safe." I thought of Wynne in the shop. I thought of the carved star on the village sign. Safe from what? The voice let the silence lengthen until it seemed to grow its own flesh. When it answered, the word dragged frost along the back of my tongue. "From the ones who don't belong here anymore." Something thumped above me. Not the measured tap of a request, but the clumsy, wet sound of a body colliding with floorboards. I looked up at the ladder. The lamp swung once where I'd tied it, making shadows lurch like startled cattle. "Someone's in the house," I whispered. "Two someones," the voice corrected. "One with breath. One that remembers how." I shouldn't have asked. How what? How to walk without feet. A draft slipped into the room from the open hatch. It carried the scent of lavender and something electrical, like air after lightning. I turned toward the ladder, ready to climb, ready to slam the door, ready to bar it with my own body if I had to. But the voice, my blood, my keeper pressed against my heart. "Wait," it said. On the far side of the veil, one of the shapes stepped forward and became not a shape, but a woman in a black dress, hair pinned in the style of no time I recognized. She lifted her hand. Bones shone beneath her skin as if she were lit from inside by a thin flame. "I carried the watchstone last," she said in a voice that crumpled me to the measure of a child. "Edith took it from me. Now you must take it from her." "I don't." The mirror of stone clouded, cleared, and showed my grandmother as I had last seen her. Small, fierce-eyed, sitting in a hospital bed that had no right to hold someone like her. She was not looking at the camera that had taken the memory. She was looking at me from the wrong end of time. "Ellie," Edith said, lips barely moving. Left of the hearth, behind the brick with the crack like a shepherd's crook. Her image blinked out. The room snapped back into stone and ash and hanging bundles as if it had never opened at all. Another thump from above. A voice too sweet rolled down the ladder like honey poured over knives. "Ellie, are you home?" Wynn's voice. But wrong around the edges, like someone wearing a face they hadn't practiced enough times. The lamp trembled. The ash ring stirred as if tiny, invisible feet were walking in circles through it. The pressure around my ribs tightened. "Go," the deeper voice said, the one that hadn't lied to me yet. "Go now. Take what's left of your grandmother before someone else does." I climbed. Each rung felt like a promise I couldn't break and a sin I wouldn't be forgiven for. When my head rose through the hatch, the kitchen stood cleaner than I had left it, as if someone had scrubbed it with air. The trapdoor pushed upward under my hands with the weight of a coffin lid. I slid it aside with my shoulder, pulled myself up, and turned. Wynn stood in the doorway to the hall. Her expression was patient and empty and hungry. Her boots were clean despite the rain. Her eyes glittered like wet stone, and for a needle-bright instant, a second pair of eyes looked back at me from over her shoulder, looking out through her, bright as fish scales deep in a river. "Tea?" she asked, voice gentle as a rope. "I was just looking for something," I said, breathless, crouching at the hearth. My fingers found the brick third from the left, hairline crack shaped like a crooked shepherd's staff. It shifted under my nails like a loose tooth and came away in my hands. Behind it, a small cavity slept in the wall, and in it lay a stone the size of my palm, black and smooth and warm, though everything else in the room was cold. The watchstone, my grandmother's last bequest. Wynn smiled with only half her mouth. "Found it then?" Something that wasn't Wynn leaned forward inside her and sniffed the air. The paraffin flame stuttered. Through the wall behind me, through the floor, I felt the veil room open like a pupil widening. I closed my fingers around the stone, and it pulsed once, twice. The house inhaled. The other eyes inside Wynn narrowed. "I think," I said, standing very slowly, "we should talk in the parlor." Wynn tilted her head like a hummingbird hearing thunder. "Yes," she said, voice bright and breaking. "Let's talk about doors." The parlor was the coldest room in the house. Even before Wynn stepped inside, frost began blooming across the window panes, sketching webs of silver that spread in delicate, deliberate patterns. The air thickened with the scent of lavender again, too sweet, too sharp, as if the smell itself was alive. Wynn, or what wore her face, smiled faintly. "It's strange, isn't it? The way the hollow never forgets. Generations come and go, but the debt remains." Her voice had layers. Under the surface calm, something else was speaking through her, lower, older. Not quite words, but resonance, like a second voice buried in her lungs. I held the watchstone tighter. It pulsed faintly, a slow heartbeat against my palm. "What are you?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Wynne blinked once, twice. The pupils of her eyes dilated, swallowing the color. "I'm the part your family locked away," she said. "The voice your grandmother silenced. The one who remembers what happened when the first veil built this house." Her head tilted as if listening to something only she could hear. Then she smiled again, softer this time. "You heard it too, didn't you? Beneath the floor. The calling. That's how it starts." I took a step back. The watchstone grew warmer. Beneath my feet, the boards vibrated as though something below was stirring, responding. "She said to take this." I told the thing wearing Wynne's shape. "Said it would stop you." The smile vanished. Edith never understood. The stone doesn't stop me, it anchors me. It's what let her bind me here. You holding it just means you've taken her place. The room shuddered as if the house had exhaled all at once. The paraffin lamp flickered wildly. The flame elongated into a thin, vertical spear of light before snuffing out completely. For a second, I saw the true shape of what was inside. When a silhouette too tall for her frame, limbs bending at impossible angles, face splitting into many faces, each whispering over the other. When the light returned, Wynne was herself again, standing calm and patient, as though nothing had happened. "Put the stone down, Ellie," she said quietly. "You'll feel better. You'll understand." "No," I whispered. Something cracked in the hearth. The same cold voice from the veil room murmured inside my chest. "Don't yield the stone." Wynne's expression flickered, almost pity, almost hunger. "Then I'll take it." She moved faster than she should have been able to. I barely had time to raise my arm before she reached me. Her hand brushed my wrist, and for an instant, it wasn't flesh at all, but smoke, solid only where it needed to be. The warmth of the stone flared like a burning coal, and the thing wearing Wynne screamed a sound like glass splintering underwater. She staggered back, clutching her hand. Steam rose where our skin had touched. "You shouldn't have come here," she hissed, voice raw, layered again with that buried tone. "The wardens died with your grandmother. You were supposed to let the veil fall. Maybe I'm not like her," I said, my voice trembling but steady enough to sound like defiance. "Maybe I'm worse." The house groaned. Something above us shifted, heavy enough to shake dust from the ceiling beams. Wynne's expression twisted. "Then you'll die like her too." And then she was gone. Not walked out gone. The air folded around where she stood, collapsing into a single point before expanding again, leaving only silence and the faint echo of her words. I stayed there for what felt like hours, gripping the stone, afraid to move, afraid to breathe too loud. When the silence finally broke, it wasn't by sound but sensation, the faint, rhythmic pulse of the watchstone syncing with my heartbeat. I looked down. Its surface had changed. Fine lines had appeared across it, glowing softly like veins of light. The pattern matched the sigils carved into the veil room. I knew what it meant. The seal had weakened again. By dawn, I'd gathered what I could. A flashlight, rope, my grandmother's black book, and a notebook I found in the desk, one that had belonged to her. The first page was a single line, written in the same trembling script I'd seen in the black-bound volume. "Every warden ends where the veil begins." I returned to the cellar. The trap door was open again. Not forced, not broken, just open, like it had been expecting me. The air that poured out wasn't cold anymore. It was still, like the breath before a prayer. I descended with the lamp, each step echoing too long, like sound took longer to die here. When I reached the bottom, the room was different. The bundles of hair and bone were gone. The ash circle had been wiped clean. Only the black stone wall remained, shining faintly as though lit from within. And carved into the floor in front of it was a new symbol, the crooked V, inside a circle, fresh, raw, as though made by hands that didn't bleed, but remembered what bleeding felt like. Something was waiting. "Edith," I said into the quiet, "if you can hear me, if you left this for me, please. I need to know what you are keeping here." The mirror rippled. My reflection blinked before I did. Then another figure stepped into view beside me. My grandmother, younger, pale, her eyes sunken but sharp. "You were never supposed to come back," she said. "You called me." "No," she said, voice trembling. "It did. Through me. Through all of us." I took a step closer. "What is it?" Her reflection looked past me toward the stair. "The veil isn't a prison. It's a wall, thin as breath. It keeps what died on this side from remembering the way out." She raised her hand. I saw the burn marks across her palm, the same sigil I'd seen carved into the book and the trap door. Our blood sealed the breach. Every generation, one of us carried the mark to keep the barrier whole. When I died, I thought it would end with me. Then why give me the stone? Because the hollow never stays quiet for long. Her image flickered. The light dimmed. From somewhere deep in the rock came a low sound, a groan like stone shifting under weight. The reflection of my grandmother vanished, replaced by a ripple of darkness moving toward me from inside the mirror. It spoke without a mouth. "Open the wall," it said. "Let us through." I stumbled back. "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," it replied. "Your line bound us. Your name kept us silent. You carry the mark now, whether you want it or not." The surface of the veil bulged outward, a black shape pressing from the other side, humanoid but vast, taller than any ceiling, its edges bleeding light. I could hear whispers now, countless voices murmuring from the dark. "Wardens," they chanted, "keepers of debt, blood for passage, flesh for silence." The stone in my hand flared again, blinding white. Pain exploded behind my eyes. I dropped to my knees as the voices screamed, twisting into a single word my name. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't in the cellar anymore. I was standing in the middle of a field, beneath a bruised sky. Rain fell sideways, wind howling across the open moor. The cottage was gone. In its place stood a ring of standing stones, each carved with the same crooked V. And in the center, a single figure waited pale, barefoot, wearing a dress of stitched linen. "Welcome home," she said. The woman in the linen dress stood inside the circle of stones, her hair plastered to her cheeks by rain that never seemed to touch her skin. The wind tore at my coat, howled through the monoliths. Yet she remained perfectly still, so still that the world around her seemed to breathe in rhythm with her. "Who are you?" I asked, shouting over the storm. Her smile was thin, ancient. "You already know. You've been hearing me since the day you stepped into the hollow. The voice under the floorboards? That was you? I am what remains of her," she said. "Of all of them. Every warden who stood too close to the veil. Everyone who listened when the dark began to whisper." Her words sank into the air like stones through water. I looked down at the mud. Between the standing stones, black roots twisted beneath the soil, pulsing faintly like veins. "This place," she said, "is the heart of the hollow. Before your family built their cottage, before there was even a village. This was where the veil was first opened. Your ancestors found a voice in the dark and mistook it for God. Lightning flashed, illuminating her for an instant. Her face was both mine and not mine features, echoing through generations. Familiar yet wrong. They promised to keep the balance, she continued, her voice now quieter, almost tender. One bloodline, one warden each century, to hold the seal. But every bargain has a cost. When a warden dies, their soul doesn't pass on. It remains here, woven into the wall they protect. I felt the stone in my hand pulse again. Then what are you? My grandmother? She shook her head. More. Less. We are all the same thread. I am what's left when duty rots the rest away. A flicker of motion caught my eye, the shapes at the edge of the moor. Dozens of figures, pale and indistinct, standing just beyond the circle. They weren't solid, yet every gust of wind bent around them as though they occupied real space. They want to cross, she said softly. Every death that came too sudden, too cruel, too unfinished. The veil holds them back. But it thins, Ellie. It always thins. And when it breaks, the wind cut her words in half. I stepped closer despite every instinct screaming at me to run. How do I stop it? Her gaze lifted to the sky, where the clouds churned in slow spirals. By finishing what Edith started, the watchstone must be returned to the heart. But the heart is not here. Then where? Beneath the house. Beneath you. Another flash of lightning and she was gone. Only the rain remained, falling in a steady, relentless rhythm that matched the beat of the stone in my hand. When I blinked, I was back in the cottage. No transition, no dizziness, just the jarring shift from open moor to the close, suffocating darkness of the parlor. The air was colder than before, the smell of earth overwhelming. The rug had curled back again, the trapdoor yawning wide like a mouth too tired to close. I didn't hesitate this time. I descended. The veil room was brighter now, not with light, but with motion. Shadows moved across the walls in looping patterns, and the stone mirror shimmered like the surface of a black lake. I could hear whispers from every direction, overlapping voices of men, women, and children, all murmuring fragments of memory. Keep the faith, they came from the hollow sky. Don't look at her eyes. I stepped to the center of the room. The watchstone burned in my hand, its light swelling until the lines carved into the floor began to glow with the same pale fire. The veil pulsed once, twice, like a living thing. Then a sound broke through the chorus, a voice I knew. Ellie. I turned. My grandmother stood at the base of the ladder, pale and translucent, her eyes full of something that might have been pride or sorrow. You found the heart, she said. You told me to come. I told you to remember. She stepped closer, her image flickering. The warden's duty isn't to keep the dead out, it's to keep them in. Them? Before she could answer, the veil cracked. A single line split its surface from floor to ceiling, spilling light so bright it painted every bone on my hands. The whispers turned to screams. From within that rift, shapes pressed forward, faces stretched too thin, limbs twisting, mouths opening wide enough to swallow the light itself. Seal it, Edith shouted. Use the stone. I pressed the watchstone against the floor, but it was too hot to hold. The markings around the circle flared. For a moment, the crack in the veil shrank, but another voice rose from the chaos, low, resonant, and commanding. Enough. The air folded, and the woman in the linen dress stepped through the fracture. She wasn't transparent now. She was solid, radiant, terrible. The storm had followed her, wind rushing through the underground chamber, though no window existed. "You can't keep us here forever," she said to my grandmother. "You promised passage, blood for freedom." Her blood. The temperature plummeted. Frost raced across the walls. Edith's form flickered, distorted by the strain of holding herself together. "It's not her burden," she said. "It's mine." The woman's eyes turned to me. "Every generation pays," she said. "If you refuse, the hollow takes what it's owed." Something inside the veil shifted again, a deep, guttural roar that didn't belong to any human throat. The walls vibrated. Dust rained down from the ceiling. "Ellie," Edith said, voice cracking, "you must..." "I'll finish it. The stone is a key. The heart is behind the wall. Place it there, and the breach will close." The light in the stone flickered erratically, pulsing in sync with the roar. I looked between them, the spirit of my grandmother, fading like smoke, and the woman whose shadow bent the air. "If I do this," I asked, "what happens to you?" Edith smiled faintly. "We rest. And me, you remember." The wall split wider. A gale of black wind burst through, knocking me to the ground. I crawled forward, the stone burning my skin. The woman in linen screamed, the sound shaking the entire chamber. "You don't know what you're sealing. You don't know what waits beyond." I pressed the stone into the center of the crack. Light exploded outward, flooding the room. The air became pure sound, pure vibration. For a second, I thought I was being torn apart, scattered into the same dust that filled the circle. Then silence. When I opened my eyes, the veil was whole again. The mirror smooth, black, unbroken. The carvings around the room had gone dark. The air was warm, still. Edith was gone. The woman in linen was gone. Only the faint hum of the watchstone remained, now dull and cold in my palm. I climbed the ladder in near darkness. When I reached the kitchen, the dawn light was filtering through frost-free windows. For the first time since I'd arrived, the house smelled like nothing at all. I thought it was over, until I saw the footprints, wet, bare and small, leading from the hearth toward the front door. They stopped at the threshold, and outside, just beyond the gate, something waited in the mist. A woman's silhouette. Still, patient, familiar. She raised her hand and waved. The figure beyond the gate didn't move again. She simply stood there, one hand raised in quiet greeting, the other hanging at her side. Morning light spilled over the moor in a bruised haze, turning the mist into molten silver. Every instinct screamed not to go near her, but curiosity, that terrible inheritance of my family, pulled harder than fear ever could. I stepped outside. The frost that had coated everything was gone, replaced by dew glistening like scattered glass. My breath no longer fogged the air. The cold was gone, but the silence was worse, too complete, like the land itself was holding its breath. The woman waited until I was halfway down the path before she turned, her dress whispering against the grass. I followed, each step slower than the last, until the house vanished behind me into the mist. "Grandmother?" I called, though I already knew it wasn't her. The figure didn't answer. She moved like someone who wasn't used to being watched, fluid, too precise. Her feet didn't bend the grass. We reached the edge of the moor, where the ground sloped downward into a hollow glen. The mist pooled thicker here, like smoke rising from a wound in the earth. At its center, a pool of black water reflected nothing at the all, not sky, not trees, not me. The woman stopped at the water's edge. When she finally turned to face me, her expression was heartbreakingly human. "You did it," she said softly. "You closed the breach." Her voice was different now, no longer the echoing resonance of the veil, but something closer, warmer. "You should rest," I said cautiously. "You and the others. It's over." "Over?" She smiled sadly. "The veil doesn't end, child. It shifts. It moves. What you sealed wasn't destruction, it was passage. Passage to where?" She stepped closer, her bare feet sinking into the wet soil without leaving a mark. "To the other side of keeping, where the wardens go when their duty is done." "I'm not a warden. You are now." The air around us trembled. Ripples spread across the black pool, as if something beneath its surface had turned over. The reflection that wasn't there began to form first light, then faces, dozens of them, pale and flickering, like candles fighting wind. I recognized some of them blurred memories from old photographs. My grandmother, my mother's face younger than I'd ever seen it. Others I didn't know at all, but somehow felt in my blood. "They're waiting," the woman said. "All those who bore the mark. They can't cross without you." "I don't understand." "You carry the key. The stone is bound to your blood. It was never meant to close the door, only to open it properly." I felt the weight of the watchstone in my pocket. It had turned cold again, but deep within it, a faint pulse beat like a trapped heart. "If I open it," I whispered, "what happens to me?" She tilted her head, eyes full of a strange compassion. "You become what they were, the keeper at the threshold." Lightning flickered across the clouds above us, though no thunder followed. The air grew heavy with the scent of rain, and something older earth turned. Blood spilled, stones weeping. "I don't want this," I said, my voice cracking. "I never asked for any of this." "Neither did Edith," the woman said. "Nor her mother, nor hers. The hollow chooses. Blood remembers." The faces in the water shifted. My grandmother's reflection looked up at me, her eyes bright with sorrow. Her lips moved silently, forming words I couldn't hear. "Please," I whispered. "I just want to go home." The woman's smile faded. "Home isn't where you came from anymore. It's where you belong now. Step forward and you'll understand." Behind me, the path had vanished into mist. There was only the pool, the woman, and the sound of my own heartbeat. The watchstone pulsed harder. Its light leaked through the fabric of my coat, flickering like a dying lantern. I took one step closer. The ground trembled beneath my feet. Then a voice clear, human terrified, cut through the stillness. "Eleanor, stop." I turned. Wynne was standing at the edge of the fog, pale and shaking, rain plastering her hair to her forehead. She looked real this time, no distortion, no strange light behind her eyes. "Wynne?" She stumbled forward, breath hitching. "You can't listen to her. That's not your grandmother. That's her, the first one, the one who opened the veil centuries ago." I looked back at the woman by the pool. Her expression had changed. The warmth was gone, replaced by something vast and hungry. "Lies," she hissed. "She doesn't understand. I am the bridge. I am what holds the balance." Wynne shook her head. "She's the breach, the first veil, the one who brought the darkness here. Every warden since has been binding her, not protecting us." The air split with a sound like tearing cloth. The black water boiled, faces dissolving into screams. The woman's eyes burned white. "You don't know what you're saying," she shrieked. "Without me, the veil will collapse. The hollow will open." Wynne grabbed my arm. Her hand was freezing. "Throw the stone into the water. End it. That's what Edith wanted. The watchstone pulsed frantically, caught between two rhythms, one deep and slow, one fast and desperate. I looked between them, the creature and the woman who might still be human. How do I know who's telling the truth? I shouted. Neither answered. The wind howled, pulling at my hair, my clothes. The mist turned black around the edges, pressing close like a living thing. Then I heard another voice, faint but familiar, rising from the chaos. My grandmother. "Ellie," it said, "do what I couldn't." That was enough. I took the watchstone in both hands. The moment I lifted it, the woman by the pool screamed not words, just raw sound. The light from the stone burst outward, painting her silhouette against the dark like a moth pinned to glass. I threw it. The stone struck the surface of the pool and sank instantly. The black water flared white. For a heartbeat, everything was silent. Then the world came apart. Light tore through the mist, ripping open the horizon. The wind roared, lifting me off my feet. The pool erupted upward, a column of water reaching for the sky. Inside it, I saw faces, hundreds of them, rising, twisting, weeping, laughing. Then, one by one, they dissolved into light. The woman screamed again, her form unraveling, dissolving into smoke and ash. Her last words were swallowed by the storm. Then it was over. I lay on the damp grass, chest heaving. The pool was gone, just a hollow depression filled with soft earth and the scent of rain. The sky had cleared. The moor stretched endless and empty. Wynne knelt beside me, her face pale but alive. "It's done," she said, voice trembling. "Is it?" She looked toward the horizon. "For now." We walked back in silence. The cottage stood unchanged, though the frost had returned, glittering faintly under the pale sun. When I stepped inside, the air felt different, lighter, quieter. On the hearth, where the cracked brick had been, something new rested, a small stone, smooth and black, cold as midnight. The watchstone. But when I touched it, it didn't pulse. It didn't hum. It simply sat there, waiting. Outside, the wind carried a whisper that might have been a sigh. The veil was closed. For now. For the first time since arriving, the hollow slept. The moor lay still beneath a pale sky. The wind nothing more than a soft hum against the heather. I woke to birdsong, faint, fragile, as if they were testing whether the air was safe again. For a few blissful seconds, I believed it was over. The nightmares, the whispers, the cold. Then I saw the door. It was open. Not wide, just a crack, letting in a single thread of mist that curled across the floor like smoke from an invisible fire. "Wynne?" I called. No answer. I stepped into the hall. The air was colder now. The kind of cold that doesn't come from temperature but from memory, a chill that lives in the bones. The footprints were back, leading away from the door, across the floorboards, toward the cellar. "Please, not again," I whispered. The watchstone, cold, black, dead, sat on the mantel. I picked it up anyway. It felt heavier than before. The moment my fingers closed around it, the world dimmed slightly, like a candle flickering in wind. The trapdoor was open, but this time there was no smell of earth or rot. The air rising from below was faintly warm, almost inviting. I hesitated at the top of the ladder, heart hammering, before I descended into the dark. The veil room had changed again. The black wall was gone. The space stretched wider than it should have, the walls shimmering like heat haze. On the floor where the sigils had once been, there was now a shallow pool of still water, perfectly reflective, perfectly silent. And in it, I saw my reflection, but it wasn't mine. She looked like me, but older, her eyes colder, her expression carved from stone. The kind of face that seen too much and felt too little. She smiled, and my stomach dropped. "You did well," she said. Her voice was mine too, though layered with a resonance I recognized all too well, the voice that had whispered from under the floorboards, from inside the storm, from the heart of the hollow. "No," I said, backing away. "You're gone. I ended this." "Ended?" The reflection tilted her head. "No, Eleanor, you didn't end anything. You took it inside." The watchstone pulsed, once faint but unmistakable. I dropped it. It hit the floor and rolled into the water, vanishing without a ripple. "You sealed the breach," the reflection continued. "But the seal must have a keeper. That's what you are now. The warden. The veil lives through you." I shook my head. No, I can leave. I can leave this place." "You can try," she said softly. "But wherever you go, the hollow will follow. Every shadow you see will remember. Every mirror, I will look back a little too long." I looked down at my hands. The veins beneath the skin glowed faintly, not bright, but visible, like the afterimage of lightning. "What do you want from me?" I whispered. "Nothing," said the reflection. "It's already done. When the next breach comes, and it will, you'll know. You'll hear the call, and you'll come back, whether you wish to or not." The surface of the pool began to shimmer, ripples spreading outward. My reflection smiled one last time, then dissolved into shadow. I was alone again. When I climbed back into the kitchen, Wynne was there, sitting at the table, staring out the window. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was steady. "I dreamed about your grandmother," she said. "She was standing in a field, holding a candle. She said the hollow remembers." "She's right," I said quietly. Wynne looked at me. "You saw something, didn't you? Down there." I nodded. "I think I saw the next me." She frowned, not understanding, and I didn't have the heart to explain. Some truths only make sense when you've heard them whispered through walls at midnight. We left the cottage at noon. The path back to the village was clearer than it had been in days. The moor bathed in sunlight that felt almost warm. I didn't look back until we reached the ridge. From there, the house looked small, ordinary, a patch of gray stone against endless green. The frost on its roof glittered faintly, though the day was mild. And for a heartbeat, I thought I saw someone standing in the upstairs window. A woman, watching. I didn't tell Wynne. Some things I've learned lose power if you don't name them aloud. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the faces in the water rising, pleading, fading into light. And beneath them, deeper than sound, the steady pulse of something ancient and patient, the veil. It wasn't angry. It wasn't kind. It simply was. 2 weeks later, I left the village for good. I sold the cottage, though the local agent seemed surprised anyone wanted to buy it. He said something about old stories, about locals avoiding the property. I just nodded and signed the papers. But sometimes, when I drive at night, the headlights catch a shimmer in the fog, a ripple, like heat over asphalt. And if I listen closely, I can almost hear it breathing. The hollow doesn't need a place. It lives in the spaces between what's remembered and what's forgotten. And I'm its memory now. Last week, I found the watchstone again. It was on the passenger seat of my car, though I hadn't put it there. Cold, still, waiting. When I picked it up, I heard a voice soft, almost gentle, Every warden ends where the veil begins. I don't know how long I sat there, just holding it, watching the way the light caught its surface. Eventually, I smiled, because for the first time, I understood. You don't end the darkness. You become its shape, so others can live in the light. I slipped the stone into my pocket, turned the key, and drove toward the horizon where the mist rose from the fields in slow, curling ribbons. And when I glanced in the mirror just for a second, there were two of me. One driving, one smiling back,